The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Standard Bank webinar hosted by SBFC, Standard Bank Financial Consultancy. We're so glad that you could join us today. Before we hand over to our prestige speaker, which is Mr. Errol Mayer, which you all know, but just to give you an intro on who Errol Mayer is, if you've missed the last few webinars we've done, he is right now, he holds a position of Head Advisory Propositions at Standard Bank. So he is at Standard Bank with us. But Errol is a certified financial planner and admitted advocate of High Court SA. He has written many tax and financial planning articles, newsletters, and study materials for universities and academic journals. He's even authored a book called Notes on Estate and Financial Plans, and he has worked as a tax advocate for SARS. And Errol was a renowned lecturer, examiner, and moderator for various universities for many years in South Africa. So he's going to be handling our presentation for today. But before he starts talking about goal-based financial planning, I just want to do some housekeeping, make sure everybody's comfortable and knows what's happening today. So this webinar, if you have any questions, you will not be able to vocalize your questions, but you will be able to type them in. On your right-hand side, there's a panel. There's a heading that says questions. If you have questions, just type those in there. At the end of the presentation, so not to disturb Errol, I will then take the questions, ask Errol, and he will give you the answers. Secondly, I just want to make sure we are all in the same room. We can all hear what's happening. So on your panel on the right-hand side, there is a small high five, a small hand. If you don't mind just clicking that for us so we can see that there's many people that can hear us before we proceed. Thank you. I see Zaria, Trevor, Tandy, Stephen, Stan, okay, and all the hands are going up. Malcolm, thank you. Thank you, Kalima. Thank you, Graham. All right. So majority has hands up, so I assume you can hear. If you cannot hear us properly, on the panel, on your taskbar at the bottom of your laptop or computer, there is that volume button. If you just put that up to the highest volume that you can, that will also help a lot. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the next hour with us. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Errol Mayer. Good afternoon, Errol. Thank you very much for taking the time out to do this presentation for us.
Thank you, Katiwe. Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to our presentation, which I guess will last about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and I will leave you time to ask some questions. So the topic that we're going to discuss is financial planning, but we're going to talk specifically about goals-based financial planning. And what I'm going to do in this lecture is to explain to you the fundamental principles of goals-based financial planning. It's something that's not unique. Worldwide, we've heard about it, and it's becoming very popular, and we at Standard Bank embraced it and made it unique, and I believe a lot of value to be added to our clients. So where do we start with goal-based financial planning? Do we kick off with doing calculations, or do we simply talk about investments and find out where can we get the best investment return, which is a popular mistake that people have made in the past and still doing so? No, it is about financial planning. And what is financial planning? Well, let's start right at the beginning. It starts with the concept of money. What does money mean to people? Now, money means different things to people, so let's unpack it, because a failure to understand what money does and the role it plays in our lives will not help us to prepare a successful financial plan. So where do we start? Well, let's go right back to the beginning. In the old days, what did we do? Well, we negotiated and we bartered transactions. I have something to give you, be it a fish, and you have something else like wood, and we would exchange some of the wood for some of the fish, etc. And that was the barter system. So what has changed? Well, money was introduced since it was convenient to barter the money. And so money became part of our lives. So money had a certain monetary value that one could determine, and based on that, there was no necessity to divide the wood or calculate what portion of the fish, etc. It was a very convenient way, and it was said in a book by a well-known person, and I think it's in Canada, George Kinder, where he says, in a way, money was the original internet. And it changed the way that we were doing things. It created a totally new world. And this is a world where we find ourselves where the concepts of fairness and exchange of favors becomes a way of living. Now, those two fundamentals is all about negotiation and trading. And that's how negotiating skills developed, sales skills courses developed, and today money is the center of our business world, but also our private life. And when we talk about financial planning, we talk about the private life. Also, what we will find in the discipline of business financial planning, which is known often as business insurance, there, money plays exactly the same role. So why is it that people will spend money? What makes them do that? Is it because it's a must? Is it a need? And I think the answer is because it makes us feel good. There's a certain emotion attached to it. With other words, you can think of it would be a female would like to do a facial. Why? Makes her feel good. Why is it that the fisherman would like this beautiful boat with 250 horsepower? It makes him feel good to go out, to see, to catch fish, and also to see perhaps the envy of other people. It gives him some kind of status in life. So it's quite true that money means plenty of things to people. And we all are unique in that respect. So just look at it. When you would ask someone for money, for instance, it is one of those things that will trigger just about all the emotions in a person. It depends whether money has been asked by the church, or perhaps money being asked for a traffic fine, or a payment that you have to make to SARS, or rates and levies that you have to pay for a plot that is not developed. All kinds of different emotions. Think about someone who wins the lottery, perhaps crying of happiness. Now there's a contradictory emotion. So it's quite clear that money has a certain effect on the way that we feel and the emotions that it evokes. So you think about it, because money is about spending it and to have certain goals. So why is it that a mother who would buy a matric farewell dress that is so expensive, only for 6 hours, makes her feel good? And another person, perhaps the husband, would feel that it's a waste of money. And so money regulates our world. So we can say that money can be defined, and this is according to Kinder, is the internal self that engages with the outside world. So we have certain behaviors. People have unbearable feelings about money, such as, and this is so important because all of us, to some degree, are affected by it. Let's start at the bottom, where I talk about family conflicts. Now remember, for a family, you want to do financial planning. But that assumes that all parties are thinking exactly the same about money. Now, there's been studies being done by especially women versus men and their priorities. It's the same household. Chances are they have the same goals because they have the same children. But how they believe in what money should do for them, they would behave differently and often cause family conflict. You just think about divorces. How often are these fights today about money? And why is it? It's not money. It's a different belief system. It is something that money would do for you. And so they have done some studies. And you can trace it back right to the beginning when, in the early days, perhaps where the woman was the caretaker and the husband was the hunter. The husband had to provide, think long term, and you will find that the caretaker would think perhaps a shorter term, make sure that things are ready today and the food are cooked. And that even today we can still see that. Because the studies have shown, not too long ago, in about 2012 in South Africa, it has shown that the woman would regard the house, 54% of them would regard the house as a good investment because there's a certain emotion attached to it. Where technically 50% of your assets should not be a fixed property and your primary residence. It was interesting that the stats showed that only 2% invested directly in shares. Is it because it was a long or viewed as a longer term thing? It also says that 30% of women are willing to spend more than 6 months' salary on their weddings. And the husband would perhaps be more concerned about the honeymoon. Go back to the feelings. What feelings does it evoke? And so our behaviors are driven because of the concept that we would have about money. So let's talk about some of the others, apart from family conflict, that is so well known to many of us. What about the principle of guilt? How can that play a role? Well, this is a true story. It wasn't too long ago that I've consulted a lady who her and her husband were farming together, both very, very competent in the farming. And there was some kind of succession plan worked out and say that in the event of one of them passing away, mommy would be able to continue. She's perfectly capable of continuing. And there's a son to help, and there were some daughters, and somehow they will be sorted out. And this we find over and over. So when the husband eventually passed away, what happened? She was behaving strangely. All of a sudden, she was giving the farm, the monies, she was giving it away. And no one could figure out what is happening because this wasn't the plan. So what one had to do is first find out this money, this inheritance that she received, how did it affect her? And deep down, we suspect there was a feeling of guilt that I received this money, all this money is in exchange for my husband. Well, quite obvious it's not so, but it evoked that feeling. And those are the type of things that people will behave irrationally with money. So when you leave inheritance to someone, you've got to be very careful. Is that person money mature enough to do it? Not meaning that he should be a chartered accountant or a financial planner, but what is his feelings towards those monies? And so we will find fear. People who were ripped off because of some scheme that they entered into years ago are afraid now to take some risk and to invest their monies. They simply don't trust people anymore. And that fear was linked to the loss of money. And so we have greed, which is a very well-known one. I want what the neighbor wants. So I think I've made my point that money maturity is very, very important, and we need to know ourselves before we can start doing financial planning. Examples that I've experienced, if a person would tell me, I don't want money problems, that's it. That person is actually asking for proper financial planning. So now you will be able to see what financial planning is all about. Is how do we deal with money and these emotions for the whole family unit. When you have, which I've encountered so often, there would be an elderly couple that would come into and consult a financial advisor, and the first thing they would say, I don't want to pay tax, because their perception is that tax is going to give them a reduced return. The question should rather be, what must this money do for you? Because after all, you're seeking advice. But by giving advice and tell a financial consultant you don't want to pay tax, and if the financial consultant is not smart enough and he wants to put it in a tax-efficient investment, then that is not the way to go about it. The real question is, what is your concern? What is it that you really want? And what he really wants nowadays would be the best possible return to do something. And that is what one's find out. What is it that this money must do for you to have what feeling? I want to be secure. I want to make sure that I've got sufficient funds for the rest of my life. I want to put a little bit of money away. Should one of us die first, the other one should be able to continue. And whatever the case may be. All those things are actually referred to as goals. So, how should we go about when we do financial planning? And this is one of the core and fundamental principles that is part of goals-based financial planning. And we do this quite often when we do succession planning, or known to people as estate planning. Planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. A very, very powerful principle. So if you could look in the future, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but there are certain certainties. And because it is such a huge event, I mean, for instance, to retire. But what you have to do is to break it down and bring it back to the present and decide, what is it that I can do now? So that if I keep on doing this, eventually I will reach my goal. And there's a fundamental step. And one of our core principles at Standard Bank, that is a fundamental step. Often when I deal, and especially in the farming community, when you consult, now they're the main asset that provides the income is the farming land. And then we often do this and we say, well, as we sit here around the table, let's quickly fast forward 10 years from now. And let's see who's not sitting at the table. And how would you like it see that things should happen? Once you understand that, looking in the future, then one can go back and look at the present and say, this is what I need to do today. And that is actually not a very difficult decision. And that is often when we deal with trust, when we deal with the last will and testament, when we deal with children that cannot work with money, then it becomes very easy to make those decisions today. So this is a very powerful principle and one of the core fundamental principles when we talk about goals-based financial planning. We are going to look into the future and let's see how we can manage it actually today. So goals-based financial planning is therefore based on a set of 5 beliefs. This is what we believe in. We always say, and when we do our planning, we start with the end in mind. This is what I want, the feelings that I will have one day at a certain stage of my life. Then we say wealth is about life's purpose. Now, when I talk to people, so often I hear, as a father of many daughters, and they tell me I'm so wealthy. Well, I promise you, they're not talking about my bank account. They are talking about the richness in life. What is it your life's purpose is all about? So every person differs. So everyone would like to be a Donald Trump, but would you really like to be? You don't know that. Because it doesn't mean if your goal is to have lots of money, you're going to get everything else. So perhaps it is important. What is it that I really want? What is your life? What is your purpose? And people differ here. Some want to be remembered, hence the street names. Some people wanted to make a difference in life. Some people live for their children. And then, quite interesting, when you read the biography of Albert Einstein, is that he actually said he achieved what he wanted to do. When you listen to Cecil John Rhodes, where I believe it said that so much to do still, that tells you all about the why in life. Albert Einstein, I believes, is that he was happy because he achieved what he wanted to do and therefore could die peacefully. So one has to find out what is it that you really want in life. And then what we have to do is to convert that into achievable goals and convert that into a monetary value and convert that to a present moment. And then we start with true financial planning. So wealth is a lifelong journey because you have to manage as you go along and reach your goals. Then we say that risk is relative. Now it's important. What are the risks we're talking about? Is it the risk of losing the money? What risk do we talk about in financial planning terms? And that is, we believe, it is the risk of not being able to reach a goal. That could be a second occupation at the age of 50. Or people live longer. At the age of 65, not to go on a retirement at 65, but to find a second career. If that is a goal, then you need to start planning today for that. So risk is relative, and that then one can conclude that every single client is different. So different horses for different courses. We all have our different whys in life. So let's go and unpack a little bit further. And what is life about? Some people say it's a game of Monopoly, that when we're done playing, we pack up the pieces and we go home. So that another day, the other people, my kids, can play the game. So one has to view it very objectively. So one way of doing it is what we believe, and we use this quite a lot. We say there are two sides of the coin. On the left-hand side, it is all about creating value. And that value that you create, you must give purpose to. In financial terms, what I've done here is I've created a little balance sheet of life. So creating value would be the asset side of a balance sheet. And giving purpose is my future liabilities discounted to a present value. So what we have to do, and a term that's well known in investment circles, is to match your assets and liabilities. So really what we need to do is to say how much value can we create, because we all are different and we do different things. And what is it that one want to give purpose to? And these two must match. Technically, if you have more assets than what you need, people find a way to do something with it. So let's unpack it a little bit. What is creating value? Well, a part of the asset side of the balance sheet is to be able to have the competency to earn income. And here we all differ. Because if you look at the professional person, for instance, on the left-hand side, he will start at the early stage in his life and will actually start saving and putting money away, often because his employer compels him to do that. So he would contribute to a pension fund. But then you will find the entrepreneur, or there I have an example of a farmer. Entrepreneur would often, perhaps at the age of 35, 40, would cash in his pension fund to start a business. So it's very late in his life that he would start accumulating assets so that he can give purpose with those assets. And giving purpose would be to buy that house, to buy that motor car, to go traveling, and to provide for education. So let's go back to the asset side of the balance sheet. So you see in the top quadrant, we have the active part of the equation. That is the ability to produce income. And the surplus of that, one would put into passive investments, which would be pension funds, tax-free investments, online share trading, building, buying properties, etc. Whatever can give you a passive return. And so the two components will build up. So as you get older and later in life, one can imagine that the top quadrant is perhaps going down. But then the bottom one must grow, because the combination must make sure that the balance sheet will balance. And that in giving purpose will match those assets. So what if then, let's assume I have more money, like a Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. What do? They give a legacy. That legacy could be charity. Could be skills because they have given purpose to their own lives, and to them it's important to uplift people and to transfer skills. A legacy could be because you would like to give your kids something more, but one has to be very careful here. Because age group of about 50 now, 55, believes in that ski principle of spending the kids' inheritance, and rather focus on themselves and giving purpose to their own life. So depending on the age group, people do believe differently. If you go back further, you'll find that perhaps a 70-year-old today, although his kids are far more wealthy than him, he would still apply that principle of fairness, and each child should get an equal share. Well, that is his value, belief system. Nothing wrong with that. But it's worthwhile having a discussion on whether you are effectively balancing your assets and your liabilities, whether you are matching them. And this is also what financial planning is all about. So far, what I've spoken about is to increase and build your investment portfolio. But there are many risks in life. So the question is then, if we look at the top left-hand side of the quadrant, and there we have a person, 30, 35, 40 years old, still building the passive side of the balance sheet. But then he wants to give purpose with his money because he set some goals. And one goal could, for instance, be to ensure that his kids will get an education. And they're still minors. So what if something happens to him? And this is where we believe is the purpose of life cover and disability. It should protect that goal. Therefore, as you can see, to take out life insurance and say, oh, well, I want to leave it as a legacy without considering the other quadrants, you are not doing proper financial planning and perhaps also doing injustice to that beneficiary. By giving a simply amount of 2 million without proper planning just doesn't make sense. Chances are easy come, easy go, all the feelings about money, and the child will squander that inheritance that we see it so quite often. Not because it's used to be not to money, it's been put in a very difficult position and all those emotions would come up. So that is not good planning. So in the event of death, one should be able to replace that person and make sure that those assets and liabilities remain matched. And that is what we do with financial planning. And so the same principle applies to disability or to protect your income, your salary. There are very specific solutions out there that one can protect your income so that you stay on track and that you, with your monies at a predetermined date, as according to your financial plan, would be able to give purpose to it. And therefore the will is so crucially important. So often people tend to think, oh, by the way, after I've done everything, now I do my will. That is plainly ridiculous. Because that will, let's say for instance, you don't have a will, or the will is not valid, which is not properly signed, whatever the case may be. If such a person would die intestate, it can be horrific for the other people. If the intention was that everything should go to mommy, then it could mean that the kids who's got more than enough money are burdened with this legacy. And now they've got to create very ingenious ways in order to look for mommy. So by not having a proper will that ties in with everything can do a great injustice to this whole concept of financial planning. And we do encounter that quite often because people think a will is just something separate. It is not. It is protecting. It's part of the planning of this whole philosophy of goals-based financial planning. So, let us now look at from another perspective. How else can we describe goals-based financial planning? Well, the term financial planning is not new to us, and it's been around worldwide, and South Africa is absolutely on par with other countries in the world. And they quite often look at us and the research that we have done in terms of consumer protection legislation, treat the customer fairly, which is part of the whole business world, where there's a business-client relationship. But in the past, because people neglected to do proper financial planning, we find that there's a great need out there. And let me put it this way. Ever since tax rates went up to 45% marginal rate if you earn more than 1.5 million. And that affects not only the high income earners, it affects the middle income earners and the lower income earners just as bad. One has to be really smart these days in doing financial planning, because at the end of the day, it's uncontrollable whether the tax rates would go up. But the way that we plan things to make sure that we reach our goals, or maybe lower our standards for our goals, or maybe be more selective with our goals, that is financial planning. So today, more than ever, goals-based financial planning is important. And one must be able to understand that even if I would pay more taxes and I want to reach my goal of retirement, there is an excellent vehicle out there, like a retirement annuity, which since the 1st of March 2016 offers incredible tax breaks. So you can offset that risk of higher taxes and less disposable income in a very effective way in order to still achieve your life goals or a goal such as retirement. So then, what was the traditional approach, which is simply not good enough in the environment that we find ourselves in? Traditionally, what people did is that they look at you and say, well, let's give you a couple of questions and see how much risk you can take. Are you a conservative investor, or are you an aggressive one? So you will give a person a 10 to 15 questions. And depending on that, the answers, one would do an asset allocation. And that asset allocation, depending on how that portfolio is constructed with the different asset classes, will give you a certain return. So if you're very aggressive, you would like to achieve a high return. So your goal is to make as much as money as possible. And people fall for this. It's the element of greed. To get a quick, rich scheme. Every couple of years, there's another one on the horizon, and they will never disappear because people are gullible, and because of that emotion of greed, they will be led astray and they will lose their monies. So the traditional approach of to determine whether this person is aggressive or not is actually what we believe is fundamentally flawed. I will ask you, prior to 2 years ago, or make it 10 years ago, you were probably far more aggressive than after a downgrade. So within 6 months, it is possible to change your attitude about the risk. This, we say in financial planning, is not what it's all about. We believe that the philosophy of goals-based financial planning improves on this traditional approach and the reason why people went wrong. So where do we start? Well, there you can see is the absolute reverse of the traditional way. As I said earlier, you start with the end in mind. And you determine your life goals, be it retirement, education. What is it you want, your why in life? Once you've got that, only then do you determine investment portfolio to match those goals. And therefore, for each particular goal, because they will have different terms, you would have an asset allocation. And that portfolio, the risk at the end of the day, is that you haven't put monies away, or the economy is a little bit of a downturn. And how do we manage that risk from a financial planning perspective? You either put in a little bit more money, or you postpone that goal for another 2 years. That is managing risk in a responsible way. And there it is. The first one is very much investment driven. It plays on our fears of greed and fear, where the second one strips the emotion out of it. And we say, what is it that you want? And we match those assets and liabilities. Now, if you would go back to family conflicts, you will have a debate forever and ever. If mommy would say, listen, the kids need this now. And you would say, but I'm thinking longer term. If we do this now, we won't be able to do other things, or we won't be able to retire. Because people have a different value system, you will have these conflicts. But if you follow the goals-based financial planning process, one can take that emotion out of it. And once both parties, even though they have different concepts and feelings when it comes to money, will both agree that these goals must be achieved, now it becomes a lot easier. And that is what financial planning is all about. So let's do another comparison. On the left-hand side, you see the traditional financial planning. And on the right-hand side is the one that we are talking about, the goals-based financial planning. So how can we distinguish the two? If you would have a financial planner doing the traditional way, his performance is measured relative to a benchmark. You made me lots of monies, and therefore you're a good financial planner, and therefore justifies I'm paying you a fee. The way we believe is fundamentally different and a more responsible way. Performance is measured according to meeting, or the success in meeting that personal goal, be it retirement, be it education. Because it's a lifelong journey, and we've got to track these goals. And this is where a financial planner comes in. Somehow, he plays the role of educator, project manager, and often, just like one would find a personal trainer in a gym, you know what to do, but you need someone to bench and to make sure that you're on track with your goals. And if you're not there, that the process can continue for my family members. I often tell people, I say, Errol, do you have a financial plan? I say, sure I do. Sure I have a financial planner. Because it's not about thinking that perhaps I know a little bit more here or there. I trust the process. If something would happen to me, then I know that the process will continue, which is like the goal-based financial planner. And as a matter of fact, with my financial planner, I don't like him very much. He can't fish, and I can't bond with him when we have time off. But what he does well is that he follows the system of goals, and that gives me the security. I've spoken about the risk. Investment risk profile in the traditional way is according to your emotions. It's not so. It should be something more objective. And we say that the risk profile is a financial planning concept. It should be determined by the nature of the goal. Now, you may have many goals. The risk is that the goal for retirement, which is a non-negotiable, you will reach it. Worst case scenario, maybe a year later, or perhaps if you're lucky, a year earlier. When it comes to that holiday that you want to take for a year in the Swiss Alps, it ain't going to happen perhaps, but that's a negotiable one. So you have to settle for second best. And this is what planning is all about. What is the risk? Depending on the nature of that goal and how important is it for me to attain it. So maybe you must settle for 3 weeks in Mauritius at the end of the day. How are assets allocated? The old traditional way is focusing on the asset management and to be active and see if we can make money for the client, but not yet deciding what to do with it. Whereas I have explained, financial planning is focusing on the asset, the matching of the assets and the liabilities, the creating wealth and giving purpose to it. How would the review process different? Well, we're not going to review the fund performance. That shouldn't be the way, and still yet many people are doing so. And technically, when you really get technical and you go and do the calculation, you strip out the inflation, then the results are not spectacular as what one thought. Now we say financial planning is a regular goal tracking reviews to see how my investment portfolio doing that is created and crafted specifically to reach that particular goal. And let's monitor. So if there would be a downturn in the economy, you don't change the investment portfolio. It shouldn't be changed. You must review your particular will. Now, the less negotiable a will is, the more conservative fund you will have. So you won't see spectacular returns, but you will make your goal because that particular goal is a non-negotiable. And that's why we find that even by statute, the retirement annuities are regulated in terms of Regulation 28 that they may not be too aggressive. And that applies to every pension provident or also retirement annuity funds. So we just follow that same principle. So where should one start? Well, we all are unique and we will have the goals for different stages in our lives. It could be overseas holiday within 3 years, or it could be at the date that I retire. That term plays a very important role because you can minimize the risk the longer the term. As a matter of fact, if the term is a long way off, you can actually have a more aggressive portfolio because the term will smooth it out and the probability, depending on how the assets and the classes of assets are combined. It is possible that one can take on a minimum risk with a maximum return so that one can achieve that particular goal. And so people have different goals. So this is the point of departure with the discussion. Let's talk about, with the client, discussion to start. Let's talk about money. What does money do for you? How do you feel about money? What is it that you want? You want security? And it's so interesting that people say freedom. And then I ask them to explain freedom. And at the end of the day, it boils down to that I don't have to work or I don't want money problems. Or I just want to make sure that my kids are taken care of and I've done my job as a parent. So this is part of the financial planning process and the discussion that one would have with a particular financial planner. So to put it in a different perspective, there would be 3 goals. And I've selected only 3. The goal to retire, the goal to educate, the goal to travel. And I went the other day, I went to the Transkei, where I find that people have 5-year contracts making lots of money and then they don't want to have a job. There, one could have a goal that after 5 years, I can see myself through and do something else. So while I'm making lots of monies, after 5 years, I know when the new term comes and I may not be perhaps elected, then I would have funds available to do something else. So there's only 3 that I selected. So the goal to retire, the time frame is different. The risk in this particular instance is not negotiable. Many people living longer don't retire. And as I've said on so many occasions, they talk about rewire, having a second occupation. At the age of 65, what I'd like to do is to be able to take people out to sea to go diving. So I need to save up for a boat. It gives me a good feeling to do that. So that could be a second career. That could be part of my rewirement or retirement plan. What you have to do is find out how much capital do you need. Now, I've done a retirement webinar previously to show exactly how do I calculate the amount of capital needed and also how I took a future value and I brought it back to the present. The time, well, 65, you determine the time, the date, and the risk, as I said, is a non-negotiable. Then on the other side, to educate or education for your children. Well, what is most important, education for your children or to retire? How does the one compare to the other one? Tough questions. But the education one, you've got to do a lot sooner. You've got about 10 years. The point is, depending on the goal, one will have different types of solutions. That's very tax effective. For retirement, a pension fund retirement is the best. Obviously, to repay the debt is the best and use the cash flow. To educate could be within 10 years for your children. So you have a shorter term. An ideal solution would be tax-free investments. So I'll exhaust all those tax beneficial solutions, products, in order and link it to a goal. The goal to travel, well, that is not so important, perhaps for you. So in a list of priorities, if I don't make it, it doesn't matter. So my risk tolerance, which is not the investment concept, is very, very high. I don't mind if I make it. I can wait another 3-4 years, or I can actually opt for another holiday, which is perhaps a cheaper option, or just go and buy a combi that I can travel all over South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. I have options available. It is not that important, and that is the risk. And so one would go about, if one would, during the marriage, have children, your priorities would change, and you have to reshuffle and reprioritize. So let's end off. Where does the financial planner comes in? Well, quite clear. I see it as a team working together. Those days where the financial planner is the investment specialist is simply not good enough anymore, unless specifically investments qualified. But financial planning is a discipline, how to assist people to take this journey, to monitor and walk the walk. So there you will see on the left-hand side that would typically be the client. Very important, because he's the one that's got to explain what is it that he wants. And with the assistance of the financial planner to identify those particular goals and a list of priorities. And then there would be an investment team totally separate that will be given the task of constructing a certain investment portfolio depending on the term and the nature of the goal, which must give feedback on a regular basis to the financial planner, that he can consult with his client to make sure that they're still on target with their goals. Now, many people don't make use of financial planners. But then, to a large extent, that objectivity is lost. And that could make things a bit more difficult, but not impossible. It can be done. If one has a solid understanding of goal-based financial planning and what should be done, it is not impossible that robo-advice in the future could work very well. But being old school, I actually prefer the role of the financial planner, because as I always say, the day that they can find a very efficient robo financial advisor, I'll be the first one in line, perhaps, for a robo spouse. So there will always be some kind of shortcoming, but different horses for different courses, and they both would play a role. And I believe that robo advice will definitely play a bigger role in future, because people are so much more educated. And I think this is it in a nutshell, what goal-based financial planning is all about. And next time, I will have as a guest some of our portfolio manager, highly qualified, who understands these principles very well. And we will talk about the specific investment strategy and solutions that are tailor-made for these goals. And we're going to talk about investment principles. How does investments behave? What is the effect of a downgrade? Should I change my portfolio? Should I move my funds overseas? Or is it perhaps not all about diversification? Remember, the main question should always be, even with this downgrade, the issue is only, will I still be able to make my goal? Maybe it could be a little bit more difficult because I have less disposable income if interest rates would go up, but it doesn't detract from the main question. Am I still doing goals-based financial planning? So thank you very much for listening, and if there are any questions, Ketiwe, then I will try and answer those questions now.
Thank you very much, Errol. That was very informative. For now, no questions have popped up So there was a question about if this is recorded earlier on. Yes, it is recorded for our financial planners. This will be placed on your SPFC portal, like all the other webinars that we do record. If you are one of our customers and this has been an eye-opener for you and you want to discuss your goals, please do engage with our financial planners, which are situated in our Standard Bank branches nationally. There'll be a thank you note as well that will be sent out with more information, an SMS line as well as a telephone number that you can phone to get in touch with the financial planner. And in the thank you note, the presentation will be attached as well as where to find the recording of this webinar on YouTube. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for partaking and joining us today. We hope this was informative. We'll see you on our next webinar, which will be in May. Look out for the invitation for that one as well. We hope you have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Errol, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kadiwe.